Luckily, it only takes 3 days to make the absolute Shadow Ramen.
Did you guys know that one of the best DS games of all time is also getting an anime? In this video, we are going to make the absolute Shadow Ramen with a twist. After a word from today's sponsor, Ridge Wallet.
Thank you to Ridge.com for sponsoring today's video. Hello again, little brother. Big brother, what are you doing here? I've come to teach you a final lesson. There's nothing more I can learn from you. I have finally surpassed you, brother. There's no way you could have done this. You can't gain strength without losing speed. But now I can hold 12 cards with cash. Ha! You're pathetic. Take this. That'll teach him. I have surpassed you, brother. That no longer works. Nani? I'm made of titanium with an RFID blocker. Impossible! No! Gain strength, speed, and 10% off with ridge.com/CHEFPK. The absolute Shadow Ramen is going to be based off of the black ramen out of Toyama. For this, we actually do have to make a white stock, and for the white chicken stock, we're going to need some garlic, some onion, some Japanese green onions, as well as some celery. Now, everything is just going to get a rough chop because we're just going to be using this for stock, so don't pay attention too much as to chopping all this stuff up. Just make sure it's broken down enough to basically fit in your pot. Now, we are going to be using a whole chicken for this because I couldn't find chicken bones locally. If you can find chicken bones, go ahead and use about 2 pounds worth of chicken bones or 1 whole chicken carcass. I do like to also make sure I debone the legs and the thighs just to get a little bit of extra bone in your stock. And since the wings contain a good amount of gelatin, I'm just going to go ahead and throw the entire wing in there. And then you're left with dinner for another day, which you can marinate with chashu. Now, since this is a white chicken stock, what we're going to do is fill this with water, bring it up to a simmer, and once it's at a simmer, we're actually going to go ahead and drain that water. Once you've drained that, go ahead and refill it with some clean water, bring it back up, and this is when we're actually going to put in all of our mirepoix. Now, once this has finally come up to a simmer, we're going to let this sit for about 3 to 4 hours just to let it reduce by half.
Hey guys, it's real-time me. We just got an evacuation notice because Oregon's on fire, so I'm just going to try to salvage this real quick, but yeah, just strain your stock, you know? Hopefully the house is still here when we get back.
So with that evacuation notice in full effect, I went ahead and strained my stock ahead of time. This actually did go for about that 3 to 4 hour mark, and it came out to be this really beautiful white chicken stock that I was actually looking for, so I was pretty happy with this. Now ideally, I would let this sit out for about 20 to 30 minutes at room temperature before putting it in the fridge, but everything's on fire. Now we actually need to make the tare, and the tare is going to be using some of this smoked shoyu, as well as a little bit of tamari. We're going to also throw in a little bit of regular soy sauce, and then finally a little bit of sake of your choice. The first thing I'm going to do is actually heat up about 4 ounces worth of my regular soy sauce with about 40 grams worth of brown sugar. And just brown sugar goes in the pot, Paul. It goes in the pot. Now bring this over to the stove and we're going to gently heat this up just until that brown sugar is fully dissolved. As soon as that brown sugar is dissolved, remove this from the heat and let it cool down. Now I'm also going to reconstitute a few mushrooms in some soy sauce as well. In hindsight, I guess you could have just put the mushrooms in with the other soy sauce with the sugar, but we're just going to ignore that and keep going. Heat this over a medium heat for about 10 to 15 minutes just until those mushrooms soften up. Now we're going to take about 3 ounces worth of tamari straight into a pot, followed by about half of that mushroom constituted soy sauce that you would use as well. Now the smoked shoyu is incredibly expensive, so we're only going to be using about 2 ounces worth of this directly into your tare. Now take your sweetened soy sauce, about 3 ounces worth of that, and place that into your pot, followed by about 4 ounces worth of sake. Now once you have your sake in your pot, this is when we're going to bring it back over to the stove and gradually heat it just to a light simmer just to burn off some of that alcohol. Once that alcohol is burned off, give this a taste to see if it's smoky enough, if it has enough mushroom flavor for you. I realized that this wasn't as smoky as I had wanted it, so I tried adding in a little bit more of that smoked shoyu. I gave this another taste and the smoked flavor just wasn't coming through. So I bought a smoker. Yes, I bought a smoker. Now, this is a cold smoker, so it won't actually cook your food for you, but it can infuse the food that you're trying to smoke. So I threw a little bit of aluminum foil over my pot, added in a little bit of hickory wood chips to the top of this thing, poked a little hole in with a paring knife to fit that hose just as tight as you can get that, so that way there's not a lot of leakage with your smoke. Throw on a piece of plastic wrap over the top of it just to hopefully insulate it a little bit better. Kick on your smoker and light the wood chips and watch the magic happen. This This was really cool looking, and I just let this smoker go until the wood chips were fully burnt out. Once those wood chips were done, I took a piece of tape and placed it over the hole after removing the hose. This helped insulate all of that smoke. Now, after about 30 minutes of letting it sit, I removed the actual aluminum foil and the plastic and gave this another taste. It was perfect. Now we do have to make the Ashitama because the Ashitama is one of my favorite toppings. To start off, I'm going to be taking some room temp eggs, puncture the bottom with a little bit of a needle, then drop these into boiling water. Make sure you do this carefully so you don't crack the eggs, and let them go for about 6 minutes. After 6 minutes, immediately remove them from your boiling water and place them into an ice bath to cool down completely. You're going to need about 30 minutes for that. While as you're cooling down, take about 3 ounces worth of soy sauce, followed by about 4 ounces worth of mirin and about 2 ounces worth of sake. This is going to be the soak that I'm using for my Ashitama. It was still a little salty for me, so I did cut it with just a touch of water to reduce that saltiness. That second taste was perfect for me. Now add this to another bowl that you're going to be using to soak your eggs, and then start cracking those eggs. You want to make sure that you do these pretty gently so you don't break any of the eggs, because the 6-minute eggs can crack pretty easily. Once you are done cracking all of your eggs, go ahead and place them into your soak. Grab a paper towel, place it over the top to completely saturate the paper towel, so that way it does cover up those eggs completely and they soak really nicely. Throw a lid on this and let this sit for at least a day. Personally, I like 2-day Ashitama. Now for the actual pork belly or the chashu. I'm using just a slab of pork belly for this, but if you can find some pork belly that you could roll up, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and bring this to a simmer for about 20 minutes in cold water to remove any of that scum from the pork. But you guys aren't ready for this one.
Now come here. Look, did you get a sweater?
Yeah.
Look at that sweater. Look at it. Nope, you can't have that though. You can't have that.
He's so handsome.
You know. Yeah.
Hey.
After equipping Gandalf with his very Halloween-themed on-point sweater, and it's been about 20 minutes, go ahead and remove the pork from the water and give it a rinse. Once you've rinsed it off, place it back in the pot with new clean water, and the clean water should really only start to cover the pork. Now grab about a 4-inch piece of konbu and add that to your water, along with about 3 to 4 dried shiitake mushrooms. We're also going to hit this with about 10 grams worth of salt and about 50 grams worth of granulated sugar. Now go ahead and poke this around a little bit just to make sure the salt and the sugar does touch the water and it's not just sitting on top of the pork. Bring this over to the stove and we're going to go ahead and simmer this for about an hour. Now the next part is the soy sauce blend. I'm using 100 milliliters of soy sauce, 100 milliliters of tamari, 100 milliliters of the smoked shoyu, 100 milliliters of mirin. Do you see where I'm going with this so far? 100 milliliters worth of sake. This is going to be added to the pork after that initial hour. After about 10 to 15 minutes, that konbu should be ready to pull out. You just want to make sure you pull it out before it actually starts simmering, unlike I did. And if you have a real drop lid, use that instead of whatever I'm trying to do with this. But after that hour, go ahead and add in all of your soy sauce mixture on top of the pork. And I also decided to add in about 250 milliliters worth of sake to the pork as well. Now we do have to let this simmer for an additional hour, trying to fiddle with this drop lid that's not really a drop lid, and I should probably just buy a regular drop lid, but we're just gonna go with it. Now after that second hour, your pork should be done. Remove this and place it into a container, and we do have to cool this down before we decide to cut it, because that is a tender boy. Oh, that leftover liquid? Chicken marinade. Now the next thing I'm going to focus on is the aroma oil, but for the aroma oil, I'm actually going to be using some black garlic I had used for a previous recipe. I'm using about 8 cloves worth of black garlic that I'm going to go ahead and chop up. And since garlic goes really well with whole butter, we're going to be using some nice unsalted butter for this, about 5 to 6 ounces. Add your butter to your pot and drop in your chopped black garlic straight to that, and go ahead and melt this over a medium heat. You want to start this gradually and then start to slightly fry that garlic in that butter to achieve a little bit of brown butter. Now remove all of your garlic and your butter from your pot, place that into another container that you can safely immersion blend, and blend that garlic with that butter. This is going to start infusing all of that garlic into the butter into where you have this beautiful melted brown butter black garlic mixture. This is going to be the aroma oil and or butter. I couldn't help myself. I took a piece of bread and just dipped it straight into this, and it was amazing. But then when I topped it off with salt, wow. Now this ramen recipe comes from the Way of Ramen, and for this we're going to be using about 500 grams worth of bread flour, 200 grams worth of cold water. Grab your questionable scale and measure out about 5 grams worth of kosher salt, drop that straight into your water, and then measure out about 5 grams worth of sodium carbonate. This is going to be the beginnings of your kansui. You want to make sure that this liquid is fully dissolved to a point to where you don't really see any salt left, and this is going to be what we're going to be using to slowly mix into your actual bread flour. Using those chopsticks to kind of incorporate that water will slowly hydrate the dough. This way you don't actually start forming any gluten until all of that flour is totally hydrated. I learned this from Way of Ramen, and I will admit that this is a fantastic method of making these ramen noodles. And once you can't really bring that together with your chopsticks, grab your pair of gloves and start bringing this together by hand just to break down any big clumps of dough that may have too much water. Now take all of your dough and place this into a plastic bag, making sure you remove as much air out of this as possible without trying to smush it and form any gluten. Go ahead and seal this bag off, and we're gonna let this sit for about 30 minutes before we move on to the next step, which is kind of fun. I'm gonna admit, it's pretty fun. After about 30 minutes, take your dough and place this into another bag. I'm just using an Awajimaya paper bag because represent. Grab your favorite pair of socks and start kneading the dough with your feet. This is an old school method and it works out really well because you get a lot of pressure behind that. You just want to make sure you do this for about 10 minutes or so until the dough starts to come together. Mine looked like it needed a little bit of time, so Lucian came over to give me a hand. And I will admit, his little paws didn't really do the trick, so I just kept kneading this with my own 2 feet. Thumbs up if you want me to make food for the cats, because they're there. Look at him. Look at, oh, he's adorable. Hey, buddy, are you scared? Are you scared of the bag? Okay. Now, after that second round, my dough looked pretty solid, so I went ahead and removed it from the bag and let it sit for about 20 minutes, while Rachel made freaking boxed mac and cheese. I'm over here making ramen for 3 days. Now, after that 20 or 30 minutes of rest, go ahead and remove this from the bag, and we do have to cut this up just a little bit to fit whichever device you're using to roll this out. Using a little bit of cornstarch so things don't stick too hard to the cutting board or to yourself, go ahead and cut this into the pieces that you need. I'm cutting this into thirds to start off, and then we do have to roll this out just thin enough to where it will fit in the widest setting of your pasta roller. This is super important. You don't want to go too thin. You want to let the pasta roller do some of the work. Now on the widest setting, begin slowly feeding your dough through that pasta roller. This is going to give you really beautiful long sheets of pasta, and once it has rolled through, fold over from end to end your pasta to create a double layered sheet of pasta dough. This is going to act as the lamination process of making your ramen noodles. Once you have layered it, I just pressed it gently so it was a little bit easier to work with and trimmed the end so it would feed through better, and then feed this through your pasta roller again at the widest setting for this second time around. I ended up feeding it through one more time for a total of 2 total feeds just to make sure everything was nice and together. After that second feed, the ramen dough actually looked really, really nice, so I went ahead and let this rest with just a little bit of cornstarch in between the layers. And after doing all of my sheets the same way, I went ahead and used the spaghetti cutter attachment, feeding it through very slowly, letting gravity do most of the work into these beautiful ramen noodles. I was really happy with how these came out, and these are probably some of the best ones I've ever made because all of my other recipes for ramen noodles weren't the best. But the Way of Ramen has one of the best noodle recipes I've found. Throw these onto a sheet tray with a little bit of cornstarch to keep them from sticking. And since I was actually going to be using these the following day, I threw these into a bag to let them rest overnight. Just make sure the bag is totally sealed before you pop these into the fridge. It is time to make the absolute shadow ramen, and for this we're going to start off by slicing up your pork. And since I'm making a bowl for the wife and one for me, I'm doing 4 pieces of our chashu. Cut them up as big as you want, I don't care, just use the whole block if you really want to, but throw these into a toaster oven at about 425 Fahrenheit to get them crispy. Now in your biggest ramen bowl you have, add in about a tablespoon worth or more if you really want to of that black garlic butter. Drop your noodles into boiling water, and hopefully your stove is better than mine and actually keeps the water boiling. Add a little bit of the tare right on top of that butter, and this is going to be personal preference because the flavors can be really strong, so just taste as you go. After you add your tare, add your hot chicken broth on top of that. Shake off any excess water off those noodles and place them into your bowl, trying to be careful not to splash this everywhere. Now grab a pair of chopsticks and pull the noodles up and lay them over the top. It's supposed to coat the noodles a little bit, but also is supposed to make them just look better. Now grab an egg, slice that bad boy in half, make sure you don't leave any of the yolk on the knife and eat that off camera. Now grab your chashu and place 2 pieces, nope, make it look good, there you go. Now for a hefty amount of green onions, because green onions are life. Now finish it with just a touch more of that smoked shoyu, and there it is, the absolute black ramen. Wait, no, this isn't done yet. Grab that smoking gun, grab yourself a bowl, get those chips lit, start smoking this ramen in its entirety. Fill it up until you can't see the bowl anymore and let it sit. And now to unveil the absolute shadow black ramen. I don't think there's any better way of presenting this to someone and having them see this right in front of them. This is amazing.
Oh my god, smell this. Now, in The World Ends With You, it's called the Absolute Shadow Ramen, and for good reason. It's pretty impossible to get. It's probably just easier to spend 3 days making this. Oh my god, it smells... My mouth is literally watering right now. First thing I really want to try is the broth. Oh, the bowl is so hot. Oh my god, that's delicious. That is really good. That's really good. It's not overly salty. It has that really beautiful, oh my god, smoky flavor. You can taste the different soy sauces. There's a hint of mushroom in there that has a smoky flavor from some of that smoky soy sauce, plus the hickory smoke we just did. You kind of get a richness as well, probably from the butter, the black garlic butter. Oh, that's good. We're gonna go in for the noodles. I'm really excited for these noodles. They came out so nice. Oh my god. The noodles have like soaked up some of the smokiness from our little smoker, and it's completely different than anything I've ever had before in ramen. That is so freaking good. I should have smoked the noodles before I put them into the broth. Oh my god. And then of course our Ashitama. You stop it. That actually got smoked quite a bit from the hickory that we just did. Oh, it does taste like hickory. And then let's see if the pork picked up any of that smoky flavor. This is amazing. This is fantastic. If you have the means of doing this, highly recommend trying to make this. One of the most flavorful ramen I've had in a long time in a way that I've never had before, if that makes sense. These flavors I've never had in ramen before. And I absolutely love that we're able to bring this together with all those smoky flavors. Everything, the sweet, the soy, the salty, everything works so freaking well. I don't have any other words for this. I've already been rambling for too long. My name is CHEFPK. Get subscribed and remember, keep playing with your food. Honestly, The World Ends With You, one of my favorite DS games of all time. I'm probably gonna buy the Switch version. I'm just gonna eat this first.